Welcome, it's Donna Cutting again, and this is Module 6 of Customer Service 101. And in Module 6, we are talking about active listening. Time to turn off your phone, shut down your email, and focus 100% on the curriculum. As always, there's a quiz to take at the end of the course. And if you haven't already, download that learner's guide for this module and print it so you have it in front of you. And get your pen and pencil ready. You know the drill. Remember to look for the activity slide. That's when you'll need your pen and your learner's guide. Here are the learning objectives for Module 6. By the end of this module, you should be able to describe what makes someone a great listener, identify barriers to active listening, assess your own listening habits, and apply some best practices and great tips to becoming a better listener. One of the most important skills to have when it comes to providing an excellent patient experience is the skill of active listening. Notice I say active listening, not just listening. Active listening is paying 100% attention to the person speaking and making a real effort to understand the message. You can listen passively or only halfway listen, but not really make a sincere effort to hear and understand everything the other person is trying to communicate. But when it comes to active listening, it means you're making a real effort to understand the message. And when it comes to taking your patient and customer experience up to the next great level, active listening is the skill you want to develop. In fact, there are many studies that prove how important active listening is to healthcare. This study by SE Healthcare Performance Analytics and Solutions found that it's one of the key drivers of patient loyalty. Dr. William Maples, who's the Executive Director and Chief Experience Officer for the Institute of Healthcare Excellence, says that the number one thing that patients want from their physician is to be respected and listened to carefully. Now, as we've discussed before, you may not be a physician. However, you are an extension of the physicians in your practice. You are part of that total patient experience, regardless of the position that you hold. So take a moment right now and look at your leader's guide for this module. At the top, there are two spaces for you to write some notes. At the top of one of those spaces, it says, what makes them a good listener? So for this exercise, I want you to think about someone that you consider to be a really good listener. Got someone in mind? Okay, so what is it that they do that makes you think that they are a good listener? You're going to write all of those things that they do down in the box, in that particular box. Now, the second box says, what makes someone a poor listener? So I want you to think about some times that you haven't felt listened to. What behavior makes you feel that the other person isn't listening? Take a moment now and pause the recording. Write your thoughts in the appropriate boxes, and when you're done, start the recording again. Welcome back. Okay, so think about that good listener that you know. What are some of the behaviors that they exhibit that make you think they're a good listener? Here are some of the answers that I hear most regularly. They look me in the eyes. They lean in a little. They nod at appropriate times. They make vocal noises that let me know I'm listening, like, uh-huh, I see, and comments like that. Other than those little comments, they refrain from interrupting me. And when it's their time to talk, their response is appropriate to what I've been saying. On the other hand, you might feel like you're not being listened to if you are interrupted, you are dismissed, or your feelings or thoughts are dismissed. For instance, if you're describing your pain or anger and you're told to get over it, or it's not really that painful, it could be worse, that might make you feel dismissed. If someone is focused on something else when you're talking to them, on a computer screen, on a cell phone, or they're looking around the room as if something or someone else might be more interesting than you are. If the person you're speaking to makes little or no eye contact. If they respond to you, but their comments are not related to what you just said. Or if they constantly have squirrel moments when you're talking to them. Have you seen that movie Up? There's a dog in the movie that has a collar that speaks the dog's thoughts, and he is constantly talking to the people, but when he sees a squirrel, he gets distracted from the topic at hand. I know when a friend of mine interrupts with random thoughts that has nothing to do with what I'm saying. In other words, she has squirrel moments. I definitely don't feel listened to. So now that we have thought about people who make us feel listened to and heard and those who don't, let's take a look at some of the barriers that we face when it comes to being a good listener ourselves. For instance, you may feel you have heard it all before. This is especially true in a place like your orthopedic practice, where it can seem like patients and their family members come in with the same questions, some of the same complaints, and similar scenarios. You may feel like you have heard every story in the book and you already know the questions that they're going to ask. This is why it's even more important to actively listen to your patients and their family members. Because while it may seem as though you've heard it all before, each person is an individual with unique feelings and concerns. When you think, I already know everything they're going to say, you might actually miss something important. And even if their questions are the same to you, this is a new experience for them, and you want to make sure you're giving them your full attention. Another barrier is that you have many concerns and tasks on your plate. We know this is true, and it can feel hard to actively listen to another person when you have a to-do list a mile long. You might be focused on trying to complete one of those tasks or a project and feel as though the patient or one of their loved ones or a coworker is interrupting you. That can be frustrating until you remember that your patients are the reason that your orthopedic practice exists. Without them, there is no practice. And making them feel seen and heard is the number one thing on your to-do list. Sometimes we have a hard time listening because we're formulating what we want to say while they're speaking. And we want to make sure that we get our 2 cents in. I know this is definitely a barrier for me at times. Someone may speak very little of the language we speak, or maybe they don't speak it at all. Sometimes they have an accent that we have a hard time understanding, in which case it's important to listen very carefully and get backup or a translator if possible. All right, so let's take a little time to do an activity together. In your learner's guide, you'll find a list of habits that people sometimes indulge in instead of listening to the person speaking to them. We all indulge in them from time to time, and this exercise will help you become more aware so that you know where to focus your efforts to improve. So we're going to go through them together one by one. After each sentence, mark either an F or an S or an R. F if you do it frequently, S if you do it sometimes, and R if you do it rarely. Ready? Okay, let's start. Number 1, I pretend I'm paying attention when my mind is drifting off. Is this something you do frequently, sometimes, or rarely? Number 2, how about this one? I cut people off or finish their sentences because I know what they're going to say. Frequently, sometimes, or rarely. I know that this is something my husband says I do frequently. I'm constantly interrupting him and he gets so frustrated, and it's something that I'm personally working on. Number 3, when someone is speaking to me, I look around the room to see what else is happening. Mark an F, an S, or an R. Number 4, I shuffle papers, look at my cell phone, or do some other tasks when someone is taking too long or talking too slowly. Would that be an F, an S, or an R? Number 5, how about when someone is speaking, I plan what I will do next? Frequently, sometimes, or rarely? 6, finally, when a person speaks too fast or uses words that I don't understand, I let it go and I listen only for what I understand. The challenge with this, by the way, is that you might misinterpret what they mean because you're only listening to part of what they say. So do you do that frequently, sometimes, or rarely? Take a look at your answers. Circle the habits for which you put an F, frequently, and then put a star next to those for which you put an S, sometimes. Now you have habits to work on. For instance, I know that I have poor habits of interrupting my husband and also planning what I'm going to say next. And so I've been working on changing that about myself. I'm not perfect by any means, but I'm definitely getting better. Take a moment and decide which habit you will begin to improve. Write it in the space provided. Now that you've identified the habits you could change to become a better listener, let's give you some helpful tips. These are some best practices when it comes to active listening. And to help you remember these best practices, I've used the word EAR, E-A-R, as a fun little acronym. E stands for eliminate distractions. A is for attend to your patient or your customer or their family member or the person speaking to you. And R stands for reflect back what they said. So let's go through each of them step by step. The first step to active listening is to eliminate distractions. Get ready to really listen by looking up from your computer, putting your cell phone down and your work away, or at least for a moment, and look into the eyes of the person speaking. Show them that they have your undivided attention. Even if you do have to enter information or look something up for a patient, give them your undivided attention first. Remember that module about making human connections first before diving into your task? So put everything down, make eye contact, and really focus on the person speaking. If they're a child or an adult using a wheelchair, it helps to actually get down on their level so you can look them right in the eyes. The second step is to attend to your patient, again, or their family member, or your coworker, or any other customer, whoever it is that's speaking. This is where active listening comes in. Clear your mind and really work to listen to what's being said. Even if you feel like you've heard it before, pay attention to this person. Make sure your body language and your verbal reinforcement is relaxed and attentive. Refrain from interrupting. I know it's hard, but let them talk. One tip that has helped me as I try to practice this is to wait a full 3 seconds after a pause to ensure that you're not interrupting. This has especially helped me when I'm on the phone. It's difficult to know when someone is finished speaking because I can't see their facial expressions. So when there is a pause, I silently count to 3 before I begin speaking. It is a tip that's helped me pay better attention to what's being said rather than to formulate my response while the other person is talking. When it's your turn to talk, you might then ask some clarifying questions. Ask questions to make sure that you understand everything they said. And that brings us to step number 3, which is reflect back what they said. For instance, you might say something like, I'm hearing you say that you have stiffness, pain, and some swelling in the fingers on your left hand. Am I right? Basically, you want to repeat what they said to you so you can confirm that you heard them correctly. Some good phrases to use are, so from my understanding, and then repeat back what they said. Or what I hear you saying is, or let's see if I've got this. And then you would reflect back again what you heard them say. One more thing. You also want to watch for and listen to what your patients aren't saying. Their body language and facial expressions are just as important as yours are. For instance, if your patient tells you that the exercise they've been doing have been going well, but their facial expression doesn't line up with what they tell you, you might want to explore that a little further. You might find that those exercises are painful and they just don't want to tell you that. Or if your patient is fidgety or they won't look you in the eye, he or she might be embarrassed. And of course, you don't want to assume you know what they're thinking. For instance, it's possible they don't look you in the eye because of cultural differences that they have. However, these are signals that might cause you to ask a few more clarifying questions, or perhaps give them a little privacy so they feel more comfortable talking with you. If your patient seems withdrawn or quiet, he or she may be grappling with some difficult emotions. That's where the skill of empathy will come in. Active listening means you're listening to what they're saying, and you're also watching for what they're not saying. And that brings us to the end of Module 6. Now it's time to take a short quiz in the quiz section. See what you remember, and even better, take some time to think about how you will improve the active listening skills between now and the time you dive into the next module. Module 7 is all about the skill of persuasion. This is the ability that will utilize all of the skills that we have talked about so far: empathy, active listening, verbal and nonverbal communication, and more. So we're going to pull it all together, and we're going to use it to discuss how to better persuade your patients and other customers. In the meantime, take the quiz on active listening, and we'll see you again soon.